So I'm a board certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, which means I use melatonin all the time in clinical practice as well as in my personal life. And I'm going to explain to you why I believe it's overrated. So this applies even for just today. Last night, I took this melatonin tea to help fall asleep. It was around 3 a.m. that I was 2:30, 3 a.m. that I was drinking this tea. And I like to wake up naturally without an alarm clock. And so now fast forward to today, and I woke up at 2 p.m. So I slept for 10 and a half, 11 hours, which is insane to me. And that really, symbolizes for me why I think melatonin has some downsides that aren't really explored. So in the clinical field, melatonin is often regarded as a safe, natural option to use for falling asleep and staying asleep. But it's got downsides. And one of the biggest downsides is that the over the counter dose is way higher than physiological. So what does this mean? What this means is that over the counter doses can be like 1 milligram, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams. Yet the pineal gland in the brain, which secretes our natural melatonin, which tells our body to, okay, let's start getting ready for sleep. That is around 0.3 milligrams, 0.5 milligrams, 1 milligram. So that's a big difference. And so what happens is that as the over-the-counter dose increases, especially greater than the physiologic dose, then you start to build tolerance. And as you build tolerance, the physiologic dose is going to be less and less secreted. So, for example, let's say that I use 10 milligrams of over-the-counter melatonin, which is a very common dose. So I'll write this down. So EX, 10 milligram OTC. What does this lead to? This will lead to decreased own melatonin production. So we're going to be establishing tolerance from this 10 milligrams. And now our normal dose of like 0.5 to 1 milligram is not going to be able to touch those receptors, given that they're just 10 milligrams. And then second, since we're getting this 10 milligram dose coming in, what this will do is this is going to decrease our own melatonin production, as I was saying. So now our body's going to be even more dependent. So body dependent on exogenous melatonin, on OTC. So this is pretty much the classic feedback loop. What happens? You start taking over the counter, you start doing it more often, tolerance starts building, and then your body's going to decrease its own melatonin production, and then the body will get dependent on the over-the-counter melatonin, and thus it will only be able to sleep with the over-the-counter melatonin. So that's the thing. You cannot use this daily unless you want to build tolerance. I remember I had this patient case, and the patient was saying that they felt irritable. They felt like every night they didn't get a good night of sleep. And when I dug deeper, I found out that they were taking melatonin, the son and the mom. They were taking it for years and years. And so that's where I was like, oh, no. We got to cut this out. Like, we need to let your body sleep naturally. Because what can happen if you take melatonin for a while, there's some side effects that can come from it. So SE, or long-term effects. So increase sleep duration. So as I experienced today, like I slept longer than I needed to. Then paradoxically, what that can do is that can lead to decreased sleep, because as your body starts getting dependent on it, as the tolerance starts building to it, then that leads to decreased sleep. So that in turn can lead to increased waking up at night. So now you're increased waking up at night. So there's some grogginess, or there's some sleep problems that can come from that. It's not really solving the sleep issue now, because now sleep maintenance becomes an issue. Grogginess. So AM grogginess can be an issue, especially at these high doses. So AM grogginess is another issue that can pop up. So there's a lot of stuff that really is associated with melatonin. And one more thing that I think is really important to comment on is consistent dosing. So what does this mean? With supplements, they're not regulated. So your 5 milligram of melatonin from this brand may actually be like 4.5 milligrams compared to this other brand because they're not as concentrated or the ingredients aren't as good. This is different from pharmaceuticals, which is more regulated industry. So like your 10 milligram or your 1 milligram of finasteride here is going to be the same as your 1 milligram of finasteride there. But it's not the same with the supplements. That's why there's so many manufacturers, and quality of supplements becomes important. Point being is that melatonin is notorious for inconsistent dosing. So that 10 milligram capsule you might have might actually be like 7 milligrams, and so, or it might be more. So now you're getting variable dosing too. So that's another big problem with the melatonin supplement and why I think it's overrated. So now let's say you do have to prescribe melatonin or it does help the patient. Well, what can you do? So we can, to make things easier, how to fix and use best. So use it as a PRN dosing. So PRN dose, because then you decrease tolerance and you decrease dependence. So for example, last night I drank the melatonin tea. So today I don't want to keep drinking. A problem is though that since I woke up late around 2 p.m., it's going to be hard for me to sleep naturally. So I'll need something. And that's where I use the secondary strategy of alternating. So I'm going to, for example, tonight, I'm going to take magnesium glycinate. And so this way I'm helping the sleep from a different mechanism and not the melatonin mechanism. So that way my natural melatonin can start rebuilding itself. And so I'm going to be using magnesium glycinate, 200 to 600 milligrams. And so this way you let the melatonin kind of reset and let that tolerance go down again and let your body starts producing its own melatonin. So this in a nutshell is why I believe that melatonin is overrated. It's helpful because in kids and adolescents especially, it's very well tolerated. So there tend to be as many side effects as a lot of the other sleep agents. So that's the nice benefit of it, and it's quote unquote natural. But there are some drawbacks to it. And so I hope this highlights some of those drawbacks. And so if you're a provider and you want to learn psychiatry in more detail, you want to be able to prescribe medications in more detail, you want to understand the nuances of it, and you want to understand the real world application of psych prescribing, you're tired of feeling not confident, you're tired of feeling like imposter syndrome practicing, then the best way to improve that is to join our coaching academy, Level Up Psych Academy, where we've had over 230 PMHNP students go through so far and really level up their clinical skill. So definitely recommend checking that out, and I'll see you in the next video.